Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not So Comic Book. This being the show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Penny Dreadful's City of Angels. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. What I thought was kind of interesting was at that beginning where, Maria's on the bus and everything, and they drop, by a cemetery, and then she sees Magda in her real form, which they've never actually said her name in the actual show. I only know it because I just happened to be on the Showtime website and I saw her name. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So just to make it easier, I'm just going to call her by her name, even though the show's never actually expressly called her by her name. Regardless, the fact of the matter is she sees Magda and I'm like, wait, I was like, what's going on here? You're seeing her in her real form and she's looking back at you. I'm like, why is she so blatantly out in the open in her real? I was like, I don't get that. Regardless, we'll circle back to that. But obviously a big thing is obviously Tiago's kind of being he's kind of on the front of the paper because it looks like the dude, obviously him and Lewis took down last episode. They gained a lot of reputation for you took down the dude that killed Hazlitt, and the cop, it's like, yep, he's the one that did it. You see Tiago's not taking it well because the guilt that's in him, and Molly being there, and for her, it's because obviously this case was important to her because obviously Hazlitt was important to her. So it's okay, so he killed her, right? And it's yep, he did that, and just he kind of leaves it at that. He does, because obviously he can't give her any more answers about what's behind all this because everything he's done was for the purpose of protecting his brother. Granted, it was more so Lewis, but he went along with it. He didn't fight Lewis on it, and so I think that probably hits him even harder. Of I didn't tell Lewis not to do that. For him, it's a situation of there's no winning. Because even to the point she's like, she refers to him as a Mexican, and he's like, no, he's not Mexican, he's Chicano. I think for him, it's trying to make him alleviate. It's no, he's I think, because I think it's just because it's just he doesn't want, I don't know how to interpret that, whether it's a thing of I think it's trying to mean he's an American. Don't make it seem he's some Mexican from Mexico. He's just some Mexican. It's no, he was here. He was a Chicano. I think that's what that was supposed to represent. Why he kind of got agitated. Just don't treat him which honestly, I mean, maybe that's also the point to it. There's, I'm sure you can find, a deeper commentary with just present day with just that statement in its own. There's layers to that I'm sure was purposely done to kind of be a little bit of a reflection of, modern day. But regardless, and he said something I thought was kind of interesting. He's like, have you ever done something that is wrong? But the fact of the matter is you live with it. It's not, compromise. It's not a mistake. It's sin, Because obviously for Molly, but for her, it's she accepts everyone. That's the whole thing about her flock and everything. She accepts them, for better or for worse, So, and she's like, I accept you, Tiago. She's like, I love you. And he's like, whoa. I was like, oh, whoa. She said the word. Even though your mom's super against you, being with Tiago. But they do their thing. At the same time, we have Brian, that college student, meeting with Goss and Kurt about this whole situation about the rocket and everything, and then obviously trying to paint in a good picture of eventually you'll be able to meet our Fury. And he's like, oh, the Fury. He's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is people want to say that we destroy, but it's no, I'm a planet we create, and it's just trying to give it a good old positive Nazi spin. Obviously we see Lewis not too far away taking pictures, and then later on when Dottie confronts him about it, confronts Brian about it, he's like, nope, didn't get the word. It's and Lewis is and these pictures are a lie? You're lying, kid. And for him, it's he's starting to believe their cell pictures. They're not as bad as you think they are. They've done good. The fact of the matter is they want to do good and all this other stuff. And once again, you can make an argument. Once again, this definitely could be a commentary on present day of he's oh, but all that stuff that they're saying they're doing, that's in the newspaper. He's that's political. I'm not political. I'm dude, because at that point, at this point, it's not a politics thing. Once again, super relevant to today in so many damn regards, but it's not a politics thing. It's a human thing. We're talking about these people who genocide. Well, there's hate. They haven't, at this point, I don't think there's been any genocide. Just been death and destruction in that regard, but obviously not in this scale, because I don't think it's gotten to that point. Yeah, I don't know. Once again, I'm not a history buff, so I don't know. I'm sure there's probably been death in that regard, but probably not to the extent that, the history books kind of heavily reference, but like I said, I'm not well versed in history, so I don't know if there's been a lot of Jewish death at this point in time. I I would assume there has been in this entire time slot, but whatever the case may be, Lewis was about to get pissed because it's like, shut up, talking about they're not, all they did. It's like, I have 2 friends that are dead because of these SOBs. But Dottie tells a story about like, oh, like my family, we were part of this, theater, they did these different plays and stuff like that, in Yiddish. And it's like, but then one day, basically some Nazis didn't like that, So they kicked the crap out of her dad. He lost an eye, and they burned down that theater with all their plays in it. So it's a situation trying to make him understand the fact of the matter is that this hate is real. It's not just some politics. It's just some story that the newspaper is just trying to make political. It's like, no, this is real. There are people who are affected by this. I've been affected by this. But Brian, and he's like, make sure they don't hurt me. And I'm like, that's the thing. And even Lewis says it later on. It's so interesting because Brian flip-flops a lot. And it's like, the thing is, he could literally go either way, because it seemed like there was a part of him that seems like, even though he's like, oh, they're fine, he seems like he is scared of them, especially when Goss touched his head. He had this look of almost nervousness, because it's like, well, what if I can't figure it out? It's like, oh no, you will. Almost kind of like, no, you have to. I took that as almost like a threat of like, oh, you have to, because the fact is, they know he's been meeting with Dottie. At the very least, we don't know, they might not know about Lewis, but they definitely know that he's been meeting with Dottie. So it's like, I was almost halfway expecting them to kind of beat him up, to kind of be like, but I guess it's like they're trying to keep up this friendly front of like, oh, we're good. Because if they show their true colors, then he'll be more likely to back out, So there's all of that. An interesting thing is Alex is talking to the councilwoman Beck. And I thought it was interesting because obviously she's like, oh no, I'm not trying to make him mayor. I'm trying to make him president. It's like, you're trying to take a racist douchebag like Townsend and make him president, all the chaos that would ensue. It's like, oh, because it's like, because she's like, she's trying to represent the people of Worth, and she's like, well, go ahead, you represent the the people of Worth, this group or the coloreds. The fact of the matter is, we will get everyone else. And what I think is so interesting, because and then Councilwoman Beth start going like, you know what, Alex, don't know that much about you. No one actually does. It's like you popped up out of nowhere. And you know what that means? You've got a secret. And she's planning to dig it up. I'm like, that's so interesting. And you can tell Alex is annoyed. And then she slams a glass mirror behind her and it shatters. I'm like, that's so interesting. You're powerful like you are. Yet a human can bother you. That's why I think it's so interesting. I guess it makes you wonder, are there rules to this thing? Are there certain she has free reign in certain regards, but maybe there's rules that she can't directly do anything. So maybe that's why she's going so indirectly, pushing humans to do stuff, because she herself, there might be guidelines, there might be cosmic rules that are you cannot interfere directly with humanity. You can wink and nudge them, but you yourself don't have the potential to fool. I mean, which is an argument that is hard to say, because let's not forget, she literally set the field on fire that led to Tiago's dad dying in it. So it's and everything else has kind of been direct, but it's indirect, So it's just but that it's just so interesting. It's you're this powerful being. You're basically an angel, and it's angel of death. But sure, you're basically an angel, which comes with its own powers, because we've seen you have powers. Granted, we don't know the full display of what you're capable of, but still, you're not human, and you let a human is pissing you off. Because I said, it's so interesting, because I said, from time to time, especially as Alex, when things don't go her way, she gets super pissed. And I think for her, it's I think for Magda, it's a thing of no, she wants to be in control, and anything falling out of control pisses her off, because I think for one, she doesn't like being challenged. So for Beck to be standing up to her and challenging her like that, it's screw you, So obviously she's trying to get Townsend to kind of find another way around this, and it's oh, we're trying to handle things this way, because obviously Beck is trying to block them at every route. But it's oh, we need to handle this some other way. It's all right, and so it's why don't we get some? You're very cutthroat when it comes to the politics stuff, but why don't we actually get someone who cuts throats? And I'm okay. Which immediately my mom was well, because we know Alex, obviously Magda, is Rio. So I'm do you think that storyline is going to connect where it's oh, Townsend, I need you, Alex is going to recommend, hitting up with Fly Rico and Mateo is going to be used as a hitman to kill Beck especially where his story is, because obviously, like, he meets up with Josephina, and obviously for him, it's like, I did something I didn't know I was capable of. Like, it awoken some darkness in him, and it's like, I would have never thought I would be capable of killing someone. Obviously, he doesn't say that to Josephina because he doesn't really get a chance, because it's like, what, you're going to the temple? Like, all she's talking about is stuff from a religious point, and you know, his mom is super religious, so for him, it's like, you're talking all this spiritual stuff that's not real. I need something real. I can't talk to mom, I can't talk to Raul, I can't talk to Tiago, like, now I can't even talk to you. I am kind of alone at the end of the day, and it's just kind of like, I mean, you had your mom, but you pushed her away, because I guess for him it was like, because I guess in his mind she's on that same wavelength of like, you're religious, you know, you know, it's like your forgiveness isn't just necessarily from you, it's from like a religious standpoint, because, oh, God forgives, so you'll forgive. So it's just like, you know, how do I know you're not talking to me directly, you're using God's words to kind of talk to me. So I think that's what that is. But I mean, it's still, but also, once again, it's probably shame where it's like, the last thing he'd be able to do is talk to his mom about it, you know, because it's like, I don't want to disappoint her, scare her when it comes to me as her son. I don't know. But he feels like, I guess, like, you know, Rio and Fly Ricky might be the only people, Fly Rico are the only people that have his back. I'm curious how he feels about the newspapers, you know, because it's like, I don't know if he realizes it, but it's like, you know, your brother knows you're behind it, yet he let someone else, you know, so that's why I'm curious, like, how he feels about that, because obviously he's avoiding Tiago like the plague, you know, so I'm so curious about, you know, all of that. And, you know, but the whole point I was making is that, because of that, like, they set that up about Mateo, like, oh yeah, like, I did something I can't believe, like, that's why I think, like, especially once again, because Magda is both Alex and Rio, you could use one identity to help influence power with another one, you know, so it's like, I think, because, I don't know, granted, it might be someone else, it might be a thing of like, you know, Townsend's like, oh no, we're going to use Kurt, we already know, well, I don't know if he doesn't know that Kurt's a killer, but you know, he handles the dirty work. I don't know if he knows that for sure. So I was like, he might in his mind think, because obviously him being, you know, Townsend being the racist piece of shit he is, like, he'll be like, oh, let's get a Mexican to do it, you know. So that's why I kind of leaned. I don't know. Is he so racist that he would never do that? Or is he racist enough to be like, yeah, because in his mind they're lower than him, you know, that he's like, oh, obviously they'll take the job, blah, 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 do whatever I want them to. Or maybe, I don't know, like I said, maybe he's asking. Because Alex can't necessarily do it. Because people be like, oh, Alex, you look a lot like Rio, you know, but who knows? I mean, it might just be like, oh, she might show up as Rio and be like, oh, we have this opportunity, make up some lie about killing Councilwoman Beck, about it being, you know, something, trying to spin it to be like, oh, like, it could be like a thing for them of like, oh, this is the step in the right direction, you know, our way to start this war. We started it with Riley, but the fact of the matter is you need to go bigger, go harder, you know, to kind of make a point, you know, that we're here, you know, so she could easily manipulate. Like, we'll kind of have to see. But along with all of that, it's the whole situation with Maria because obviously, you know, Peter is trying to explain to his kids, which I actually completely forgot that Maria worked at. I was like, right, you're the maid at his house. I was like, this shit is, once again, like, everything's so damn connected. I didn't even correlate because I forgot. Like, I think there's been at least once or twice, she's popped up. Because, like, I remembered, I was like, right, she pops up in, like, she's working at Peter's house at the beginning of the season, but I feel like she might have popped up once or twice working with him. I just, like I said, I just let it slip my mind. But obviously it's like, oh yeah, where's mom? It's like, yeah, she's sick, so she's getting help. When she's coming back, I don't know. But, oh, he's surprised and everything. You know, it's like, because Maria's trying to make everything better by being like, hey, like, you know, some things that seem bad end up turning out being good. And, oh, Elsa's here, Frank is here. And Frank's like, Tommy, and hugs him. I'm like, oh. And you can tell Tom wants nothing to do with it. He's like, get this creepy kid away from me. And he's just like, I already have a mom, I already have a brother. And it's like, oh, things didn't go as smoothly as Frank wanted them to. So it's like, okay. And Maria's just kind of going with, I'm like, is Maria not recognizing that this is Magna? Like, she just saw her earlier as Magna. I'm like, okay. But regardless, it's like, Elsa kind of suggests, like, oh, why doesn't Trevor get his own room? He's old enough. How about Frank, you know, stay with Tommy? And I'm like, oh, dude. And it's like, how about Trevor gets your room. And it's like, is that what Mr. Crawford wants? She's like, no, I think this would be best. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, once again, I'm trying to understand what her whole thing is. And so it's like, because she even said it herself, she was like, oh yeah, like you're the other important woman in his life. And I'm like, so you're trying to dismantle everything in Peter's personal life, like the two, like, despite his relationship, like by removing Linda, you're removing like him kind of like, because I guess he was just so accepting, like, oh, this is what my life is, and just accept. He would have never moved, but like she kind of manipulates him to kind of feel like, oh, I'm strong enough to make this decision. But what did Linda say? Like, oh, you feel like you're a strong man, but at the end of the day, you're weak. This won't last forever. And now I guess she's trying to get rid of the other strong woman in his life, someone else he listens to. Like, her manipulation, her like temptation won't fully work if there's other people there to kind of at least pull some of him away from her. So, and even Peter's like, oh yeah, I guess that's the right, you moving in your shed, and she's like, okay. And so I'm like, okay. I was like, this is interesting. But then Peter has a talk with Maria, because for her, she's like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. And obviously he's excited about it. He's also like, oh, what do you think about us? And she's like, yeah, she's a very pretty woman. And it's like, oh, yeah, she is. She's clean and pretty. Oh, yeah. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Even the fact that she's smoking and stuff like that. It's like, am I off the clock? I was like, yeah. She's like, then yes, I do smoke. And it's like, huh. But then later on, Elsa's like, the fact is, the boys, I think Maria's kind of a little too close to the boys, because it's like, yeah, they're learning Spanish. If they were going to learn any other language, shouldn't they learn German? And it's like, and she also fixes them up food from her culture. Like, aren't there a little too much of a culture clash going on here? Shouldn't they know more about their German side rather? But it's like, oh, Maria's known them since they were babies and stuff like that. She's like, oh, just ignore me. I'm like, so it's like, yeah, you're trying to worm Maria out of the way. I'm like, that's interesting. And then there's our whole situation of like, obviously for him, he's like, I was miserable before, but the fact of the matter is now he's like, oh, I can dream so much. I can dream so big and everything. And then she's like, oh, like, and she says a line that I thought was interesting. She was basically like, oh, those dreams are all going to come true and everyone's going to see them. Like, he's kind of looking almost like, wait, what does that mean? I'm immediately like, what the hell does that mean? Like, is Peter not picking up on that being like, it seemed like she's trying to bolster, I think, like I said, she's trying to worm her way into his heart and then get him to the point where she like fuels that anger in him. Like I said, little by little, because like distancing him from Maria. I think she's eventually, my thought was this, because remember they made a point of like, oh, it's like, oh, look at all this like silverware that he has. It's like, do you have any? She's like, yeah, we kind of break it out on special occasions. My immediate thought was she's going to frame Maria for that. She's going to steal it and plant it on Maria, and then there's, oh, Maria, you got to go. And, that's what I thought was going to actually happen in this episode. Doesn't mean it won't eventually happen, but it's like Elsa's trying to, like, move Maria out of the way because this way she has more of a hold over Peter. Then there's a whole weird situation where it's like, once again, I feel so bad for the little kid who plays Frank, but it's like, that kid, the character is just so goddamn creepy. I'm like, that's a kid, one of those creepy ghost kids or something out of, like, a movie or something, like he's just so creepy, and the fact of the matter is the way he's acting around Tom and everything like that, and it's like, oh, I want to be a good brother, teach me how to be a good brother. And even Tom's just like disturbed by it, and it's like, oh, you can't sleep because he's like, yeah, but I like the end, like my hamster like running on a wheel, it makes me know that he's okay. Can I sleep with you? I'm so scared, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh dude. He's like, tell me you love me. Tell me you love me, Frank. He's like, tell me you love me, Tom. And I'm like, oh, this is weird. He's like, I love you, Frank. I'm like, oh. I was like, why you sound so weird and needy? And then he's looking at his hamster, and his hamster just stops rolling. I'm like, you killed him. I was like, holy crap. And Frank just rolls over and like he's about to go to sleep. I was like, it's like, so I guess you're trying to, like, but then this one's like, what do you do with the whole Frank situation? Are you trying to, like, break him, mentally? Like, I think, like I said, I think the point is just to, like, drain this family, but because it seems like you're not doing anything on the Trevor front. So why Tommy specifically? Is it because he's young enough to be malleable? Like, that's what I don't get. Like, you're not making an attempt with Trevor, only Tommy. So why those two in particular? You removed Linda from the equation. You're trying to remove Maria from the situation. I guess, you did enough because you moved Trevor out of the room so that all, Frank and Tom spend so much time together. So, like, that kind of locks that in. But, like, what's the grand purpose in that other than probably potentially driving them crazy? I have no idea. So, there's all of that. So, another side of this episode is the whole situation with with Lewis bringing Tiago into the fold and like, yeah, this is what's happening here. The Nazi bastards. He's like, the two of your friends are dead. He's like, yeah, we want me to just let this go. Lest I remind you, I did something for you last episode, so this is me calling in a favor, or you could just walk away. And he's like, all right, I'm with you. And it's like, okay, Dottie, this is Tiago Dottie. It's like, oh, this is one of my operatives. He's like, okay. She's like, don't give me that look, Sonny. Fact of the matter is, I used to sell weapons down in Cuba. And he's like, yes, ma'am. So the whole thing is obviously like later on there's a meeting between Kurt and Goss, and it's about the whole, oh, tell me about Townsend. It's like, well, yeah, he's this and that. He just bought this, that new tie and everything. He obviously doesn't talk about his dad, even afraid to go down the street that has it. It's like, oh yeah, no matter how much he runs, he can't get away from his father's name. But and then like Kurt starts sticking up for him. But it's like, no, he isn't just some foolish person. There's actually more to that. Like the fact of the matter is this and that. And it's like, oh. And even Goss kind of picked up on it. It's like, oh, is that icicle heart of yours thawing? He's like, let me remind you, I need you as an icicle, which is so interesting because there's a villain icicle on Stargirl. So it's interesting. I mean, it's a natural, it's an everyday word, but it's just like I said, it's just interesting. But nevertheless, he's like, I need you as an icicle, not like this. So it's like, and then immediately because you picked, especially because it seemed like last episode, Kurt kind of really opened up to Townsend. So for him to be like, huh, that's so interesting. That you'd be like, that was like, oh, that's so fascinating. So the fact of the matter is, like, it does seem like he is warming up to Townsend. Like, he isn't 100% in this just because it is his job. A lot of it is, but it's also because there's a part of him, I think, that's actually starting to like Townsend. So obviously, like, Lewis had it in his mind of like, we're gonna kill these Nazi bastards because he's like, and he tells a story about his cousins. He has some extra cousins that live in Germany, and he talked about the fact of the matter is, you know, there was the town that they're from got hit with by, like, it's taken over by Germany. It's like that town, well, or it was invaded or whatever, but it's like, it's small enough that no one would know. Like, unless you knew about it, you wouldn't know about it. So he talks about the fact that his cousin was sadly kind of a twofold. It's like he was both gay and Jewish. So, which that's why I'm like, I guess because it serves a purpose, they're okay with the whole Kurt thing. But even I was like, that's so interesting that you seem okay with it. Because I was like, I was fairly certain, like, Nazis are super not okay with, you know, homosexuality, you know? But regardless. And it seems like that is, you know, the fact. But it turns out, like, you know, it's like, oh, he was put on, like, a meat hook and stuff like that. It's like, they filmed it and everything. It's like, they send it back to, like, you know, Hitler so that he could laugh about it and stuff like that. So for him, it's just like, there's a point where you just say enough is enough. He just lost 2 friends to the, like, this whole Nazi regime. It's like, bump that. We're going in there. What do you say, partner? He's like, well, serve and protect, right? So it's like, Tiago's got his back when it comes to this. But before they do anything, whoa. Hey, Alex shows up. Okay. Whoa. Wait a minute. Is that Townsend? Does Townsend know? There's no way. Lo and behold, who else shows up? None other than Molly's mom. So this has to be connected to all of that, right? The Hazlitt's murders, because, like, obviously she's tied to the Hazlitts. They haven't necessarily tied the Hazlitt in any shape or form to Townsend, but I'm assuming maybe there's something there. Maybe it's unrelated, because like I said, that case is just falling to the wayside just because so much other shit's going on. But obviously that's going to be a crucial piece to whatever this is. I mean, I wonder, is it part of, like, Magna's thing? Like, is that, like, I wouldn't think so. Because once again, she's never directly killed any humans, you know, to a certain extent. It's always kind of been indirectly, like, she's been the cause, like, but she's never done it with her own bare hands. So that's why I'm like, I don't know. That's why I feel like there has to be rules to this. Maybe some stuff later on makes it seem like maybe she isn't limited. But now it's a thing of like, well, if Mama Bear is there, Mama Dragon's there, that must mean the daughter's not too far behind. Which obviously Tiago's already been through this where he suspected Molly, but then he was like, nah, never mind. But now it's like, wait, your mom's associated with Nazis. Are you? Like, does she know that they're Nazis? Even though you do this whole church thing and actually you're kicking it with Nazis? Okay, that's super messed up. So now that's going to cause a conflict between Tiago and Molly yet again. So there's that. Then there's Maria coming home. She's in a better mood. She's pulling out the silverware and everything, the good silverware. She's cooking, and it's like, oh, Josefina, we're having dinner. She's like, oh, I'm gonna go to the temple, and it's like, oh, her mom doesn't appreciate. She's like, oh, that. It's like, it's a church. She's like, no, that is not a church. She's like, why don't you go talk to Father Nunez? And it's for Josefina, it's like, what kind of BS is that? You're literally out there praying to Santa Muerte. You're not going to see. So it's a whole thing of like, how can you be mad at me about like turning away from the whole Catholic? Like, this is my church. It's important to me. You know, that should be good enough. And then obviously she's pissed. And, you know, Maria's pissed because it's like, yo, Raul, say something to your sister. And then just like, you know, Josefina like storms off, you know? It's like the difference between my situation and your situation with Santa Muerte is at least Sister Molly is real. I'm like, that's constantly kind of being thrown in your face, which is so interesting, considering the conversation she had with, you know, Mateo earlier, you know, for Josefina to throw that in her mom's face like that, I thought was kind of interesting. And her mom getting pissed at Raul because it's like, oh, you used to fight for your family, now you sit there and say nothing. I'm like, you're talking to your son that I would assume still kind of a little messed up from a shot to the head and everything, you know, but obviously for her, she's just frustrated. So, you know, her family, she's even looking at the table and she's thinking about literally the first episode of the show. And it's just like, it wasn't that long ago her whole family was together and now they're falling apart. So she goes to talk to Santa Muerte, and then even I start picking up on like, why the hell why is she calling you Coyote? Wait a minute. What the hell do you mean that you're a bitch of a... What was she say? Like, your bitch of a sister is interfering. I'm like, wait, you know what's going on? Wait, what? And that threw me for a damn loop. I was like, wait, Maria's in the know? And in fact, I mean, we know Santa Muerte came and visited her before in the season, sure. But it's just kind of like I thought, like, oh, she finally just responded to her. But now it's like, oh, there's a history here. Like, what the fuck is that? And so it's a thing of like, oh, and she's even like, oh, she's pulling my family apart one by one. I can smell her, the beast. And even at one point calling her a cunt, I was like, geez, no, because she calls her a cunt to her face. I was like, geez, that's interesting, calling a divine being a cunt. That takes a lot of balls. Like, holy shit, Maria gives no fucks, especially because her family's involved. So I was like, holy shit. And it's like, you know, because for Maria, she's mad at Santa Muerte because it's like, you do nothing. You just sit there while she's like basically destroying my family. And it's like, and then Magda pops up. I'm like, oh shit. And she's like, you know, but I don't blame her because it's like, I know exactly what it's like to be loved by you and then rejected. And it's like, do you remember those days, sister? And she's like, I made my choice. And she's like, yes, but do you remember? And then the tear rolls down Santa Muerte's face. And it's like, she's like, oh, there it is. One single tear, or maybe an ocean full. Now go back to the shadows. So I'm like, is that why Santa Muerte, like, I guess, whatever her choice, I guess her choice of just kind of, maybe her and, I don't know. There's so much context to that we don't know or really understand. Because I'm like, so maybe it's not Magna necessarily that's limited. Maybe Santa Muerte did something in the past that now it broke her to the point that she became like kind of a hollow version of herself. So it's like, it seemed like whatever fight she has just kind of disappeared. And so it's just, but like, I guess like, whatever she did in the past, she turned against her sister. So it's like, but now her sister's kind of like, it's almost like a thing of like, and then like she starts tempting Maria because she's like, oh no, don't pray to my sister, pray to me. And I'm like, why? Like, are you trying to replace your sister? It's like, oh, but it seemed like, once again, it seemed like you don't give a shit about humans. You think humans are shit. So it's like, why? That's what I was trying to understand. But then I guess, again, it's all about, because it's so interesting because Santa Muerte is like, oh, like, don't you think so full of yourself that she's personally coming after your family? It's like, can't help but think can't help but feel that way considering the fact is she's winking and nudging, you know, Mateo in a certain direction. And at the same time, like, all this other stuff that's kind of revolving around it. She's in the centerfold of literally everything. But it's, yeah, it was interesting to me. And even Magna was like, oh, why should she call you Coyote? Because that's my spirit. And everyone's like, why anything else? You know, you could be like, well, it's like a raven or this or that. And it's like, why an old dog? She's like, I am an old dog. You know, I am a dog, you know? So for her, it's just like, obviously, Maria doing whatever it takes, you know, to protect her family. Right, I had lost track of my point. I do apologize. But my whole thing was like, obviously, we see that she's manipulating everyone else. She's manipulating Rico and Mateo as Rio. She's manipulating Peter as Elsa, which I'm wondering, does Maria recognize that that is Elsa? I don't know, because obviously she has enough of an influence to make you go, all right, Alex, how long have you been working here? I don't even remember. Yeah, don't get too caught up on the details. So she has enough of a kind of like a wave of magic where she can like blur your vision a little bit, or make you a little hazy on the details. So maybe when when Maria and Elsa meet, she can smell it, she can sense it, but she can't tell 100% that that's Elsa. Maybe, I don't know. Because all she's really concerned about is her family, not the rest of her other life, and that pertains to Peter and stuff like, so. But she's manipulating all that. Alex, manipulating Townsend. But it's like, maybe this is her. Like, she knew she couldn't come at Maria but any other way. But this, it's like, oh, Maria's a religious person, she had to come at her straight up. And it's just kind of like, oh, I could just like wipe you out at any moment in time. It's like, oh, I can pull your family together, which is so interesting because you play such a huge role in pulling them apart in the first place. But it's like, just kind of come to me and almost like worship me and believe in me, and I will make everything with your family come true. It's like, okay. She's like, yes, I will die, but the fact of the matter is not today. So the fact of the matter is, as long as there's air in these lungs, I will fight you. Now I banish you. And I'm like, holy shit, Maria. So that's once again, I'm like, and it's so interesting because the whole conversation about like, oh, you're Santa Muerte and stuff like that, it's not real. It's like, oh, it's super real. And your mom is like supernaturally connected to all of this. Like maybe she's kind of like the equivalency of like a God, what would be the word? Like very spiritually inclined. It's not just like from a religious standpoint of like, oh, she's aware of the spiritual supernatural world. Like, maybe I thought Molly might be the Vanessa of this series. Maybe Maria actually is. I mean, maybe like Tiago and the rest of the family, maybe Tiago might be on the cusp of becoming like her, like kind of, spiritually sensitive or something like that. I don't know, but like the fact is that, like I said, it seemed like Santa Muerte and her have a, history. Even for her to know enough to know and smell and sense that Magda was behind everything, it's like, that's, like I said, it's just so like, wait, where's that coming from? Like, wait, we need some deep diving on that. Like, hopefully we get an episode where we get in backstory or understanding like Maria's background, or just like, is she just a religious enough person to know like, oh, I know like the cosmic supernatural game that's going on here, or like, I'm so curious to find out. I'm very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.